Oops, I'm trying to go live here.
You're live. You're live.
Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with Warrior K9. How are you?
And Joanne Soike with For Better, For Worse.
And Lisa Bataska with K9 Defined.
Let us know you're there. Today we're going to be talking a little nose work. Actually, a lot of nose work. Today we have Dana Zinn and Sue Sternberg. They wrote an awesome book, and I've worked with these two ladies for many years, and I'm so excited about the book that I quickly asked them to join us to talk a little bit more about it, and also for you guys to ask questions. If those of you who've already, a lot of you have already purchased the book here before this event tonight, so hopefully, I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but yeah, hi Hannah. So we're gonna kind of delve in. So I'm going to let Dana and Sue to talk a little bit about who they are. And so I know most of you know who they are, but we're going to still do that for those that don't. So Dana, go on ahead.
I'll go first. So we can wrap up. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. This is my first ever Facebook Live event. It's very exciting. I'm never on social media ever. And so this is like crazy for me to be here. So thanks so much, Nancy and Joanne and Lisa, for asking us to come. And just a little bit about me. I've been with Nosework since the beginning. I was in the first class in Southern California in 2006 and was one of the first certified Nosework instructors back in 2008, and kind of brought the sport to Colorado and built it here. And just over my career have had the wonderful opportunities to teach and instruct and CO and judge and do a lot of the spectrum of Nosework. And I've learned so much, and I've loved working with people like Nancy and Joanne and Lisa. I'm not sure we've worked together, but anywho, it's been a wonderful journey that's led me to working with Sue, and we'll talk more about our collaboration and creation of the book, but that's just a little bit about me. So over to you, Sue.
I'm Sue, and been in the behavior shelter world since 1981. Mm-hmm. And I was doing.
You look so young, Sue. How's that?
What were you, 5?
And I've been doing dog sports, and it was Dana Krevling who pestered me. You got to try Nosework. You got to try Nosework. And I was like, oh, ho hum, I do agility. I don't do. And then I tried it, and I was so hooked. I actually think that that Nosework is like the finest dog sport to ever have been created. And I think what NACSW has done is embed into it, it welcomes in all dogs more than any other sport. And anyway, I'm a huge fan of Nosework. Started doing it with my dog in 2014 and continued to do it. I always said, I'm never going to instruct. I don't want to teach. I just want to do it. And I really don't instruct. Dana and I do these clinics and stuff together, but I don't have classes or anything. But I started thinking about it from the lens of agility handling, and because that's all body language. And I mean, the dog, you're leading the dog with subtle movements and positions and communications, but there's so many similarities between handling dog agility and handling in Nosework, most notably that if your handling is unclear, it can really stress out the dog and chip away at their drive over time. So I heard Dana speak at Texas Nosework camp years ago, and I was like, oh my God, I love what you're saying. And finally somebody's talking about this stuff. And then, I don't know. And then it went from there.
Yes. Well, so what prompted you guys? I know you both, been in the nose work for a while. What prompted you guys to write a book? Because there's not. That's I always get that question from some of my new students, like, "Hey, is there a book that can help me?" and, and and there really hasn't been one. So I wanted to kind of like what prompted you besides the fact that it's needed, but what said, "Hey, let's do this. Let's write a book."
We when the pandemic hit and everything sort of shut down, we thought, oh, like let's start a Patreon group and do some teaching online. And so we did. And one of the things that we offered 2 video shorts. Every month was a different topic. We offered 2 video shorts, a webinar, and a newsletter for different price tiers for Patreon education. And so we wrote a newsletter every month. And we did it for like 14 months or something. And then we couldn't bear that work and the pressure anymore. Things were opened up. But we were like, God, we should do something with these newsletters. Like we should put them together. And at the time, it sounded like, oh, we'll just take those newsletters and we'll. No, it was not that easy.
No. Yeah, that's where we started it, with that kind of as the skeleton of it. And then we quickly realized that, we've got to build on this, we've got to build on this, we've got to take this out. And it was literally 2 years of online. We would work together over Zoom and tippity on a Google Drive doc that we shared. Yep. And we did a couple of in-person meetings and photo shoots, and it was just so many people helped us edit it. We would send it off and we'd think, yeah, we're done. And then they would come back and like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand this. So we're back to the drawing board. And I feel like we could have edited it for another 5 years, but we finally were just like, nope, this is it. And it really comes from, like Sue said, just this desire to give people more information and to have kind of, whether you use it or not, it's there. And to have it in your hands and to be able to refer to it, and rather than a webinar where maybe you don't watch it again, or you have an instructor and things come in and they go out, just having that just to reference again and again could be really helpful. So that was our main goal there.
Yep. And it's kind of the natural, I know I'm interrupting, but the natural progression of a dog sport, right? Where it starts out, everyone does it. And then at some point you're like, oh, the human part, like, oh my God, we got to get our act together. And like, what are we doing? What are we saying with our bodies? So we sort of did that.
So one of the first chapter is what I love, because I find that the first chapter is, I have it right here, is the Bank of Joy. Yep. That to me is so important. And I think as we get more into it and as the sport evolves and grows, it becomes, that goes further and further away. So the chapter is the Bank of Joy and Enthusiasm. I love this, my favorite chapter though, because it's so important, because we always have to remember to come back to that piece all the time. And this is just in nose work, but also in behavior training, filling that bank with positive. So when you withdraw, so could you talk a little bit more about that? Because that to me is like, it's everything. I just love that you guys started with that.
Good. So I'll let you start with that, because our very first workshop, I really think that's where it developed, don't you?
I don't remember.
The bank of Joy.
Well, I remember. Yeah, it was the first analogy really that Sue kind of came up with. It was one of the first few workshops we did in person. So yeah, but I'll let you expand on that first.
I mean, I think what's really important, and it's easy to lose sight of it with trials and competition, but that our dog's state of mind and what they're feeling about the search and their job and what we're saying to them with our body language really matters, and that I always believe that that drive is not necessarily something innate in a dog. Like, I know some people select a dog to have high drive, or, certain breeds you think, oh, those are high drive. But I truly believe that any dog really can be high drive, with that some are born with a lot more money in their bank, and you can withdraw all the time. You can make suggestions and take over the search and be unclear and pull them this way and that way and present over there. And those dogs are like, yeah, no, I'll keep searching. I'll keep moving with, a lot of speed and whatever. And then there are other dogs, I think probably the vast majority, who feel every little withdrawal. They feel every time the handler's unclear, or the handler like tries to point them to a chair that they think the dog should search. And those dogs could be very high drive, but they will lose their passion and enthusiasm and confidence with a lot of withdrawals. They just don't have as much money innately. And when you have a dog that's more sensitive and born with less in the bank, you have to be really conscious of what you do in your own handling, and you put the dog first and try to, I don't know, get it right.
Yeah. So I know a little bit of, you talked about how do you put into the bank, right? If you don't have a dog that is super high drive and is super like, go get them, how do you put that in the bank? Because I think that's where we get derailed. We think, okay, he's got it now, we don't have to put any more in the bank. It's like, no,
Right.
not true.
Yeah,
So
I think
go ahead.
one of the best ways to add money to the account is to allow the dog to make choices. Dogs are very good at searching, and they are innately wonderful at it, but there's a lot of other components that go into the search, whether it's how they feel about the environment, how they feel about the training that they've had, the relationship with the handler, like all of that kind of goes into play. And so when we want to increase the amount of money that the dog has in their account, it's basically like, I'm going to allow you to make more choices in the search than not. And when the dog has more autonomy and can actually kind of work odor in a way that makes sense to them, and they feel like the handler behind them is actually listening and responding in such a way that it really feels like teamwork. It's not like they're left isolated to problem solve on their own. And it's not like they are completely being led around all the time. It's this wonderful kind of teamwork that happens when the handler's actually really listening to the dog and responding to what the dog's trying to do in the search. And the dog can have success in ways that make sense to the dog and not always to the handler. And those little choices that we make to say, oh, no, I am going to let you do that, or I'm going to let you find this hide when a way that works to you, or I'm going to let you kind of evaluate without rushing you on. Or it's all these micro moments in the search where you're saying to the dog, what do you think? And when the dog can answer that in a way that makes sense to them and feels good to them and really feels like the handler's listening, it's like the money just pours in. So when you build this really big bank of credit, and then you go into a trial and you have to do, whether it's an elite and it's you can't go back, and there's certain rules that don't make sense to the dog, or there's one area across there where it's I'd really just like to get over there so we could search it really quick. So I know it's my idea, but let's go do it. When you have all of this account built up, those little things that we do, they don't have as much of an impact, but that does depend on the dog, because some dogs, it doesn't matter how much they have in the account. As soon as you take any money out, they're like, I don't like that. So it's really just knowing your own dog and being so much more in tune with what they need and what's going to keep them motivated.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Once you get a little deeper into the book, right? And I mean, we've talked, so I know your training style. You talk about an experiment that you did, right? Where there was kind of the blank side and there was the stuff side. And I'm sure you didn't do anything crazy with your handlers, but right? Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
like what you set up and then what you saw and then how surprising it was just to see experienced teams and what happened?
Yeah, this was cuckoo birds. So this was like this was a uh-oh.
Keep
Buffering.
going.
Can you still hear me? Okay. So it was a long time ago. It's before Sue and I were working together. It was just a random exercise. I had a big warehouse. I had half the warehouse loaded with things and the other half was blank. And the hide was in the blank part, but I didn't tell the handlers. And so what would happen was the handlers would go in and they would orient their body all just to the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And every time the dog would try to go past this way, they wouldn't move with them. They would stay facing the stuff. And the dogs, it was like this invisible boundary just appeared where they would go boink and they would orient back to all of the things that the handler was looking at. And this was like, I didn't even have a really clear understanding of the whole picture of what that meant at that time. But that was the first kind of exposure I had to the power that we had, because I never did agility or anything like that. So the power that our body language and orientation has to our dog and what they respond to. So, and as soon as the handler went like this to the other side, the dog went boop and went over to it. It was freaking amazing. Yeah, so it was just one of those life lessons that it was like, yeah, I mean, we have such a huge impact. And like we were talking about earlier, Nancy, if you've done any agility anytime, you know the power of these babies.
Yes.
It's like as soon as you turn one way or the other, the dog's like, got it. And it's the exact same thing in nose work.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then I kept hearing, people would say, oh, well, you can get away with just following your dog around through NW 1, 2, and 3 and bumping into hides. But when you get to elite, you really have to step up and be more, not more controlling, more part of the search or, be whatever. And the flaw in that thinking is like, first of all, I don't think I've ever seen anyone in NW 1, 2, and 3 just following their dogs. They're all leading their dogs. They're all saying, cover this and let's search the chair. And so if that's what's happening at NW 1, 2, and 3, and then they get to elite and they think, well, I got time management and I got to, make sure we clear this area because we won't have time to get back. Then the dog already doesn't know how to be the leader and the dog doesn't have enough money in the account. And you hear what happens is people are like, oh, I'm not sure my dog's elite material. He's really slowing down, or everyone thinks they're just getting older, or, you get used to it. But I don't think so. I think one of the reasons we wrote the book is I think people really need to understand what the impact of what they're saying and when they're saying it, and to know what they're saying. I think people were unaware. I look at my videos at a trial. I'm like, what was I doing? I don't remember doing that. I thought I never did that, Yes. But and it's it's shouting at our dogs. And I'm like, God, could we please remember that they have the nose? We have eyes, like so. They're the ones. They're the amazing creatures that really know what they're doing, and we should honor that.
So, and that's one of the things that foundation is so important. That foundation that because now again, as we were talking earlier about, we're seeing a lot different training styles out there that are not, the foundation isn't what the dog needs. They don't teach that independence and the drive to odor and all that early on. And they're always under control in the beginning. So that's really hard to fix it a little bit later. Because in the foundation, teaching we're setting up so the dog can be independent and make those decisions and all those choices. But when your foundation is set up where you're controlling that more, it's really hard to get the dog to make the decisions on their own because they're so used to being led around, or I don't know what the better word is.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Whereas I've really come to believe that we should be good handlers from the moment that we start the game.
I do too.
And that I think that so often what happens is we kind of present the dog the problem or the game, and then we say, good luck. And we kind of stand back and we just kind of watch and we talk about what the dog is doing. I mean, I used to do this all the time. I just talk about what the dog is doing, the odor's doing, and people were like, ooh, and then I don't get them into handling until the dog's really on odor and they're kind of getting ready for an ORT or their first trial. And that's a big missing piece too, I think, in the foundation, is that we're building the team from the beginning. Like Sue always said, like, you want to make sure that you're kind of presenting the picture early on that you want the dog to have for the rest of their search career. We don't want to introduce giant changes as the dog's kind of going along. If we start out as good handlers and the dog knows that there's that support there, they're actually going to be more independent.
Yeah.
And there's not this big kind of learning like leap. It's like they just kind of incrementally learn all the way along. By the time you get to your ORT, you're kicking butt.
Yeah.
And it's not kind of that back and forth. But
And also, I think a lot of foundation stuff, people think that teaching independence is about standing back and letting the dog work and not interfering, right? Or like, let them off leash. They need to learn independence. And it's like, no, independence. You're there. Like, you should be supporting that dog. And I feel like we should be handling the same on or off leash, like our orientation. We should have an imaginary taught connection between our dog and us, whether we're on leash or off. And the dog should be feeling like he's pulling the handler, even if he's not pulling the handler. And then we're responding correctly if we imagine that we are being pulled, that we are being led. But independence is taught through supportive and clear handling. It's not taught by sitting back and letting the dog, work far away. And so I think that's an important distinction too.
Right.
So
Because
let me ask you a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
we do a lot of off leash initially, and then we add the leash back in intermittent, as we go, because some dogs aren't comfortable being away from.
And some people don't know how to work with a leash in such a way that it's a connection and not a steering wheel.
Right.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense.
Leash work is hard.
And that's behavioral stuff too. Like when walking on, it's there for safety, not for
right.
Absolutely.
And that was going to be part of my question. There was, you really, and I'm saying this as a statement with it's really a question, right? You really can have the same support and connection with your dog with no leash attached. It's the human factor of learning how to use it correctly. That is the taught leash, is the don't get it tangled, is the all of the things, right?
100%.
Is that kind of, do you see anything with the leash other than kind of tapping the dog on the shoulder a little bit to let them know you're physically connected to them? Or is it more about, if you are a great leash handler, is there any difference between on or off leash in terms of connecting with the dog?
Well, it could be. I would say depends on the dog.
I think I do think it's dog dependent. I agree, Nancy. It's like some of them really love to have that constant feeling of, I want to know where you are at all times. And some dogs are like, as long as I know, like, I can pretty much sense when you're around, I'm cool with that. So yeah, I think I was just talking to my students the other day about this. I think one of the reasons my dogs work pretty much the same on and off is because it feels about the same to them. There's not any real big difference in my handling, whether I'm on or off leash. So I think that makes a big difference too, how the dog feels about it. But I feel Sue and I both believe it should really be the same.
Yeah,
It should.
I mean, I think the dog feels the leash. in some way. And sometimes it can just gather their thoughts in a little bit, even if you're not restricting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there is a difference, but I feel like people think off leash, oh, that dog can work at a great distance. And it's like your connection fizzles like the farther you away. The dog has to work a lot harder at a distance to maintain what they're doing. And I mean, it might take us a longer to catch up because the dog's off leash and moving fast, but we should be making the attempt to follow the dog. And even at a great distance, just like in agility, all of our body movements and body language are the same. We're just moving a little bit less, but we should still be oriented to where they are. We should, if they're curving, we shouldn't be, pushing their arc out and all those things.
Right. I agree, because even if they're far away, most of the time, once you've seen a team that's polished, whether they're on or off leash, that dog only goes a certain distance where they're connected and where they're working together beautifully. When you see it, it's
Yes,
it's amazing to watch, right?
I agree.
It's just lovely to watch when you can go either way, because and I always tell my students, you want to be able to be as good on and off leash. It shouldn't be different, right?
that's right.
But people can't, some people never go off leash, and that's because there's a trust issue there.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
It's like, if you don't go off leash, it's because you don't trust your dog to do the job. So that's a first hint right there.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to say was, one of my favorite times is when you first work with a team, right? And they're astounded at what their dogs are doing, right?
Yeah.
It's just
so great.
It's so, yes. And it's the much needed bone from the sky when when things are rough at times, right?
Yep.
But I think at that point, as an instructor, that's, reading the dog, reading the person, helping them learn to understand each other is all part of that foundation piece. And then you can see some of the upcoming inhibitory behaviors from whether it's the handler-dog relationship that you can address. I always liked teaching it. I don't teach sports as much as I used to, because I like working the relationship and helping grow dogs in a different fashion before moving into some of the sports stuff, because I think sometimes when we get into sports, depending on your competitive edge, it might inhibit your relationships. And I think then when that happens, that becomes very tricky.
Yep.
In terms of recovery for both you and your dog, depending how far you delve into it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yep.
It's
That's one of the reasons, like Nancy, why that first
Yes.
chapter is so important.
Yep.
Because if we're going to take our dogs into these competitive environments where they don't care, they don't care at all. It's all us and our ego. But
Yes.
it's so we need to make sure that we're taking care of them
Yeah.
if we're
Yep.
going to do this.
Yeah.
And it's our responsibility.
They're
Yeah.
the priority.
And I have to tell you, I've been doing nose work since 2010, like in this area. And I just got my young 15-month-old puppy ready for his ORT, and you're going to laugh, because I don't know why, I was like, I just got to get this done. And that was my mindset, because I don't know why, but it was, because I don't have to get it done. He's only 15 months old. It's fine. I got time. Anyway, I had the impending ORT, and I think that's what did it. Finally, I'm like, you know what? Whatever he does. And I also remembered this dog is a little different in a couple of different ways. So I incorporated more play into our training, and voila, it was like magic. How about that?
Nice.
So cool.
And it was, but he reminded me, I need to, it's like, he's 15 months old. I'm not in a hurry, but I just wanted to, it's like, for me, because of my schedule, he doesn't care about my schedule.
He doesn't know it, right?
He doesn't know it.
Yeah.
Because if I don't get it done, I can't, it's going to be a while. And I finally just cut it out. because it was like, and he reminded me, he goes, if you don't stop it, I can't do this for you.
Yeah. Dana and I
So
were
great.
talking today, and we've talked a lot about redefining what success is, right?
Mhm.
Like, you may want a ribbon or you may want the title or whatever, but success really needs to be defined by your dog's state of mind and how the training you've been doing is revealing itself and making sure that your dog is feeling fantastic.
Right.
Like, so success shouldn't be defined as finding all the hides, whether it's in training or at a trial. I mean, you get a higher score if you find more hides at a trial, but it's, I think, really all too often, especially in training, we're like waiting for that dog 3 minutes to find that last difficult hide, and then we help them and we point to the hide and we linger near the hide, and the dog finally gets it, but his spirit's a little broken and he feels overfaced or feels like it was hard, but you helped him. And then, you get to a trial and you can't really help them in the same way, and they're stressed. And I don't know, we need to redefine success, and it really has to be a dog-driven definition, because they're the silent partner, really, and we can't do it without them. And we're doing it for them, so we really need to do it for them.
That's right.
Yeah, not really book related, but I wish, this is the one thing I wish NACSW would change, which is redefining what a pronounced search is, because some handlers are dying to get those P's, and I've seen it all different ways. I've seen it when I've seen somebody get a pronounce that didn't even title, and that was real special because it was the connection between the team, right?
Yes.
And I've also seen it where, if you don't go left to right and you don't do this and you don't do that, you're not getting one. So it's like, don't strive on somebody else's subjective opinion of you and your dog. Right. When you have a good search, you know it, you feel it, you walk away going, we were awesome.
And like they used to have the Harry Award, right? That
Yes.
box, and for the rescue dog. But I think there should be some sort of like teamwork or figure skating pairs award. Where you're really you're saying this team was amazing, and for whatever ways you want to define it, and it's not about they qualified, right?
No.
Or they didn't get any no's or whatever. Maybe they called finish as soon as the dog said he didn't want to walk on the slippery floor. Like, I'd give a P for that, right? You put your dog ahead of dragging him in there. So I don't know. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I think the more, because it's really judge dependent, right? Because I know out in Colorado here, we have judges. And when I was judging, I mean, we definitely had trials where people got a pronounced ribbon when they didn't title. Because the teamwork was beautiful. Right. And you never know when that environment's going to shift and the hide just becomes unavailable. And it's like, I still want people to feel like what they gave their dog in that search mattered. Yeah. And what the dog gave them in the search was phenomenal.
Right.
And those are the things that we want people to, I mean, that's, I'll be honest with you, that's what trialing should be. And I believe that with all my heart. And so I think it's just about kind of opening more. I'm telling you, it's just about kind of shifting the mindset of what success really is. And I think it's happening. I really do believe it's happening. And I believe there are more and more people out there in dog sports who are recognizing teamwork more than perfection.
Right.
Yeah.
And that really is, we try to foster that at our place, because we have the spectrum. And so we all have our type A. I got a title and I got, but it's nice when they have the other students that balance it and say, it kind of keeps things kind of on check. So kind of nice. A little bit of peer pressure is helpful there. So a couple of questions. So Amy asks, do you find that, like agility, all dogs have an individual space bubble? Some like you closer, some like you further. I would in scent work. Like,
I'll start, and then Dana, you can chime in.
Yeah.
I think they probably do, but I also think distance from your dog is more dictated by the environment, right? So if you've got a huge ballroom and it's empty of everything and there's some chairs at the far corner, your dog is going to move through space more quickly with less changes of behavior, less probably changes of direction. And you can have more distance from your dog, but you get into a cluttered environment where there's like tables or chairs, and you've got to be closer to your dog because you want to stay connected, right? Like the dog is searching different little regions as the odor gradients are on different edges, and really you have to be there to be supportive. And so I think a lot of people are scared about breaking the bubble or getting too close or, doing those things. But I think that comes more from handling that's not been that clear, and rather than the distance. Like I think when you're clear about your handling and the dog feels really powerful, they'll just, you could be 12 inches from them and they'll just turn around and cut out. And you'll be like, I'm coming, they'll move around you. They'll be thinking of their odor. So I think, as we said in the book, and we had the little corgi playing the accordion, but, distance from the dog isn't set. It's not set for any individual dog. It will change based on the environment. Although I think every individual dog, I think some dogs don't care if you lean in to reward head on, and other dogs will be like, I don't like you leaning in. So I think in terms of space bubbles that way. But
if you're a close talker, they might not.
Good analogy.
It's like you're a little close talker. Julie had another question. Leash versus not using, and when to do so in different scenarios. If you do trust your dog, what type of searches would you say would be good off-leash searches? 1 room versus 2 rooms, large areas like cafeterias?
That's a good question. So it's trickier if you have like a library or kind of an environment like that where your dog can get out of your sight pretty quickly. I think about like the big horse barn we have here in Estes where we did a summit, and it's huge and there are stalls everywhere. And working off leash, you've got to move fast. Like you have to be able to keep up with your dog so you can keep them in sight. Because once they get around a corner, it's like, whoa. And then they start looking for you sometimes. And then it's like these roundy-roos that happen, and it's all this kind of chaos that can ensue. So for me, if I've got to make a choice, it's kind of like, how comfortable am I moving through the space with my dog off leash, and can we kind of keep each other in sight? I feel like if the dog doesn't care one way or the other, that's one of the things that I might have my students think about, or I will think about. A big off-leash space, a big open room that I can see the dog everywhere, probably more apt to work off-leash. But again, I'm going to move with the dog as much as possible. I don't want it to feel that different.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know if that answers the question or not, but that's one of the parameters that I have.
My main thought about on-leash or off-leash is where the search boundaries are. So like if it's a big interior and there's dots in the middle of the room, and there's like out of bounds would be really far or, take a lot of time, I opt for on leash because I would rather anchor and hold my dog past. I would let him go across the boundary, but only to a certain point. Whereas if off leash, I could see I might have to call my dog back. And repeatedly. I'll do it once, but I'm like, if I have to do it twice, I think it's less of an interruption and less demotivating to have my dog on leash and to be moving more smoothly. So for me, it's, at least with the dogs that I've been trialing with so far, it's a matter of search boundaries and how far out they can get, or like, is it some hazard that they want us to avoid? Because I have a dog who's suicidal, so I would have to, keep her on leash, or is there a railing that leads down into a 30-foot drop? We're going to be on leash. So that.
Yeah. And as Dana alluded, it depends on you can keep up. Like with my
Yes.
shepherd.
Right.
Yes.
Him being off leash is totally cool because we both move at, I mean, he's a little faster than I am, but I can keep up with him. I can keep him in sight, and he's more thoughtful about what he does.
Yeah.
Where my lab, no, she's in a lot of rooms. I'm like, no, we're gonna keep going together because otherwise I may not be able to find you ever again. So yeah, it really depends. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you on your chapter on false alerts because I thought and I did like the one on containers about it brings our handling to a much more clear place, right? And in containers where everybody's worried. So I wanted to kind of touch on those two things: false alert, why we get them, and a little bit on containers because those are for a lot of people, it's their big bugaboos, right? So and they're usually, in my experience, the false alerts aren't really false alerts in many cases. It's just a miscommunications. The dog was just checking something, and I just love that your information on giving the dog the time to work it out and think about it. So if you could talk a little bit about the false alerts, because that's one that we've all been there at some point. With that,
can I create a false alert for everyone?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. The template for the classic false alert. So you in training, you do more known hides than blind. And in training, you're not aware that you are facing the hide. Your dog goes to the blank part of the search area and you're like, yeah, whatever. You're aiming yourself at the hide. You linger by the hide. As your dog passes a hide that you think he should be working, you stop. So he comes back and works it. You in training, especially with known hides, you help him find or her find the last very difficult hide that takes 2 or 3 minutes, and you do so by putting him on leash, holding him, aiming, not moving, whatever. So you have that set up, and then you go to a trial where it's blind, and you have the mindset, okay, well, I got to be, I've got to cover my search area and do the time management. And so the dog usually is allowed to find the first hide as a leader. And then the handler starts thinking, especially at 3, right? Oh, there might be another. And so the dog finds the first hide, and then the handler subtly aims the dog in the direction the handler thinks they should be searching. Then the dog searches and passes the piano, the only object on that side of the room. And the handler's like, you know what, we should check the piano. And the handler does this lingery aiming, AIMIN thing toward the piano. And the dog says, I know what this is. We do this in training all the time. When you know where the hide is, you aim and you help me and you linger and we hold here. And so the dog walks up to the piano. And now the dog's like, I was leading at first, but I think you're leading now. And the dog will sniff obligatorily and then stop. And the handler usually then walks a little bit because they're doubting the dog, and the dog looks and they call the false alert. Voila. That's your false alert. Almost all false alerts are handler generated.
Mm-hmm. I believe it. You're muted. Nance, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, my beagle was barking. I've only seen maybe 1 or 2 in my time as a CO, a real false alert from the dog. But most of them are that.
It's sometimes it's the judge's discretion. I mean, sometimes you get a no, and it's like the dog thinks they were right, the handler thinks what they read was right, and it's just like, well, a lot of other dogs got closer, or I'm only looking for this kind of thing. So once in a while,
Yes.
it's just a judge's discretion kind of thing,
And
right? And I know what that feels like, and I know what more of what that
yeah,
looks like, and I don't usually don't hang on to that much. But
yeah,
like what Sue says, and what Nancy just said, is that so often the false alert can start way before the actual call is made. Like
yeah,
it's this whole routine that leads up to
yes,
this misunderstanding.
Right.
And those are the things that we want to kind of try to, in the book, we try to just keep more awareness of body language and more consistency in handling between trialing and training.
yes,
And
Yes.
it's if you have a dog that false alerts a lot in training and you ignore it until they get to the right hide, like sometimes the dog will just guess all the way to source. You're teaching them to guess. You're teaching them to false alert because they know they will eventually get to the right answer.
Right.
And so it's so important that we set up a structure in training where we are not only setting up enough hides that the dog can successfully get to source on their own, we're handling in such a way that if they don't, it's okay. We're not going
Right.
to fix it for them because we can't fix it in trial. And if I have a dog that guesses a lot, sometimes the search ends. They don't get to find the right answer. And so I want to motivate them to find that answer on their own because that's what they have to do in trial.
right.
Right.
So it's like, it's just this whole thing that can start so early on in training and it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, my dog, not everyone, but the person's like, my dog's lying to me. And it's like, oh, we need to kind of peel those layers and say, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And we need to handle the same, known or blind. Like we have to be handling our dogs, not the search area or the obstacles or the containers, right? Like we're there to follow our dogs,
Right.
not to say, check this, check that.
Right. And for those of us who instruct, there are times when I say, okay, he's not gonna finish this, or it's okay that he doesn't get one because he's just not able to at this time. And in the beginning, when I did that, my students would be you could see them get all,
Yes, it makes them so sad.
but now I have one student I'm thinking in particular. She was like, okay, and she just was really cool about it, and didn't sweat. And I'm like, oh thank God, because it is hard as an instructor, but I do the dog, I advocate for the dog, of course, but sometimes that's what it is. The answer is you can't find it for whatever reason today.
Yep,
Or
exactly.
you're working so hard and so beautifully. I don't want to make you work till you start dropping off that. And I don't want
Right.
to start, flattening out. So I'm going to end and we're going to be all happy and you're going to get a huge reward and connection for leaving the search. And we're going to end on that high note. The high note isn't defined by finding the last hide.
Right.
Or any hides.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm only stepping out to turn my heat down. I'm not leaving.
So we had a question that actually is just along that topic. Basically, if you know how many hides are in the area, your dog's already covered the whole search area and they don't find everything. Do you keep them there? Do you leave? And part of that is, I think, that bank of joy, right? So talk about what you do there.
We say a lot of times it's dependent on where the dog is in their training, right?
Yeah.
So a way more experienced dog, I'm going to vary kind of in those scenarios, how long I keep them in, how many hides they find. Maybe I give them that extra time to work that final problem. Maybe I don't. The key connector though, regardless of where your dog is, how many hides they found, is, like Sue said, trying to capture energy and also leaving with joy. So no matter what happened, now I would say, I'm not going to be super joyful if they peed on the tree. I'm not going to be super joyful if they just spent like too much time sniffing the grass. Like
Right.
I have neutral exits. Okay. I where I'm like,
Yeah.
it's such a bummer that happened that we can't like get to finish this search together. Let's go back to the car. Blech. But if they're working and regardless of the situation, we're going to end that search like, hot damn, that was the best job you could possibly have done. That was fantastic. So when I feel like if I have that elixir of that happy exit, like I have that no matter what, it doesn't matter if they don't find that last hide.
Right.
Because they're going to leave that search feeling good. And what I want is for them to come back in with just as much vim and vigor as the previous search, right? We want that energy. We want that energy. So we have to kind of reshape and rethink like our training sessions. If it's not always about the last hide, if it's not always about that kind of perfection, then we are mapping a different kind of search for us and the dog. We're looking for different levels and markers of success.
Yes.
And we it's easier for us in some ways to find the right moments to end. And what's really cool is a lot of times, like if you're like, oh, that's cool. That was a great job. We're done with that. You don't get to have that we don't have to find that last hide or whatever. A lot of times the dogs come back in and they're like, I want to find that hide.
Yes,
and it builds that motivation that way. And Sue's had this with her newer dog Nog, where you're like, okay, all done, and they're like basically giving you the finger, like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I want to keep working. And when you have those moments, that should be like filling our hearts with like, because we've done something right if we're getting those moments where the dog is like, I don't want to stop.
I'm not
And
leaving.
They may still have to, but the more moments we're having like that, where they're like, then I'm like, oh, well, I think I can have more sessions where I give you more time and you can handle that. And I'm not overfacing you and I'm not giving you too much. But if I'm having my dogs coming in and they're like, after one hide, they're like, I think I'm kind of done. Then something's there's a hitch somewhere in the training where they probably had too much too often. So it's kind of looking for different markers and finding out what's the best time in.
We don't necessarily care about them problem solving. We want them to find joy in problem solving. Like they have to love to work problems. And in nosework, it's very like different than other sports. I think it's very hard to calibrate frustration levels and stamina and endurance because you don't really know what the hides are going to do. And you didn't know that radiator hide was going to, take 10 minutes for every dog to find. But, and like, he doesn't miss out on something if he can't get that ridiculous radiator hide that, is not terribly findable for most dogs. But if he has the desire to search for 9.5 minutes, you're good to go to a trial, right? You get through Elite and Summit. But in order to calibrate and to build a dog who loves problem solving, the only way to do it is to end before the dog flattens out and feels tired or overfaced. Not every time, right? Like we stretch it sometimes and keep the dog searching to gauge, like how can you work for 5 minutes? Do you still enjoy it at 5 minutes and as much as you did at 1 minute? And but that's what we're working for. And I think a lot of times we're setting what we think are odor problems. Oh, I want my dog to get the triangle or the close converging. And I don't think dogs think about it that way. Or if they do, they don't go like at this trial, oh, you know what? It's a triangle. We worked on that in the training building. I think like this is a completely new country for them. It's a whole new language. And what we want is the desire to be like, there's a mishmash of many odors. I'm going to parse them out and find them. I want to do this.
Yeah. And that's, and that's hard when we get involved too much. There's an interesting question. It's not a question. It's a, Terry asked, not sure if it's in the book. She said it used to be reward at source, but now I'm seeing more people having dogs come to them for the reward. Now I'm not sure what to do. He's 5, and we just started as well. And I'll let Dana and Stu, but there's a reason for that. They're doing a lot of training with a lot of the bomb detection folks. But anyway, it's basically about reinforcement for the hides, right? Is what the question is. Like, is it okay for the dog to come back and or is it okay to go to till you get there to pay at source? So what is that? What are your feelings on that? Because I know we are seeing it more here. They're trained by the bomb trainers, which is how they obviously you don't want the dogs to stay at source if it's a bomb. So, but they're starting to do that for nose work as well.
The only thing that I would comment is, there are trainers and handlers who mark the decision point, and then they'll reward wherever dog comes back to them or whatever. The only thing I'll say is I really like the continuity of feeding at source and then having my dog restart the search right from that piece of odor information. I just feel like he's, and I could be wrong, but I feel like he's re-entering and continuing the search from the last point that he had, as opposed to I found it there, now I'm here in, La La Land, and now I've got to start searching again. Whereas I feel like there's probably more odor information to start with right at source. But I don't have anything to prove that,
Yeah, no, but and for me, I feel like, that's what we've been doing forever. And that's really what I know. I do. The only situation where that varied for me is a student of mine was not physically able to get
right. Yes.
pay. But that's only like, one out of hundreds of students, because she physically, and it did not affect her dog's ability to go to odor either. And we offset it with going to source exercises that she could do, so that
I still feel like, of course I do, because we just wrote the book, but that our role and our clarity in handling and the supportive role and making sure that we're orienting and knowing when we're taking over and making a suggestion and when we're not is what ultimately helps build drive, and ending on a high note sometimes, and not just on finding a hide, I think will get you to the same place, in that you'll have a dog who loves to hunt and is dying to problem solve. And you can get there many, many different ways. I think we all probably have our favorite ways of starting, but the most important component is the handler learning how to support the dog and build clarity and confidence in the dog.
Yeah. And I would agree that, I'm a paying at source girl, but that's because that's how we started. And I've never found a reason not to do it that way. I guess to me, it depends on what kind of success you're having. That's been successful for lots of people. So I'm kind of with that. And again, not to saying that you can't do it, but it should be for a special reason, not for any old reason. And also, again, the big goal is clarity to the dog.
Right. Exactly.
So, and I think paying at source gives that dog the clarity of, I found this and I get paid for that again. So anyway, rewarding at source is kind of how I roll. So Diana has a question. When in training, when you want to end the search, but the dog wants to keep going, how do you keep joy high and avoid getting into a discussion or disagreement with the dog? If the dog wants to keep going.
I would keep going.
Yeah, right. That's what I want to keep going.
I mean, if you're at a trial and you've said finish, get the hook and you have to go, you start your happy exit ritual, which is feeding, connecting, and the dog should love that as well. But like I was training my nog at home, and it was in my little house, and I ended on a high note, and then I took him by the collar, and I was like, now you need to go in your crate because Chappie's going to come out, whatever. And I had the collar, and I'm like, kennel. And I let go of the collar, and usually he runs in, and he shot away, and he went and started to find the last pocket. So I'm like, you got it. I'm going to jackpot you for that. So like if my dog hunkers in and is pulling to get out of bounds somewhere, because, you know, they're like, there's odor information out there within reach that I want to get to. And I'm like, but it's out of bounds and we're eating up time. If my dog's like, no, I really want to, I'm going. Yep. I'm going to go with the dog. I want my dog to be able to say that to me. And I want, you know, so like in training, I would let him keep searching.
Right.
You're just reinforcing huge desire.
Yeah. And I like the, I like what Diana said about like kind of you want to kind of avoid an argument, right? So you don't want it to be punitive when they have to stop, because you know, in a class you can't search forever, and in a trial you definitely can't search forever. So you know, I would say having a all done cue is really important. I think the dog really understanding that the activity has stopped, and then giving them something else positive after that has stopped. Obviously, if they love nose work more than anything, there's nothing that's going to top it. But I can try to make the ending of the search and the way back to the car enjoyable as well. And so I mean, if that's a really like, what is it, champagne problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a champagne.
That's great. And we're not saying end before your dog finds all the hides all the time.
Not at all.
Not at all. You know, just you want to find the balance there. But I think like if you're going to err on the side of pushing your dog for too long so he flattens out and gets discouraged, as opposed to ending early and then bringing him back out or not, whatever, I would end too early. I think you're still building a better dog than you are over facing the dog or letting him flatten out with frustration.
Yeah. So really quickly, could you address the container? That's because that's a thing for people. We don't have that much trouble with it. I think that the people find it so. Some of the competitors find it so like it's a problem, and it's really. And I know you talked a little about going out, you know, the last box and all those kind of things that you talked about. But how would you?
I believe the subtitle, Nancy, to the chapter on containers is "When Aliens Land."
Yes, when aliens land, that's exactly it.
Because, like, in no other element do handlers turn into unrecognizable creatures. Like some of the handling in containers, people start handling the containers and not the dog. Yes. And then all of a sudden the dog's like, I don't know who you are. This is really different. And I also think the difference is the breadth of difference between handling known and blind in containers is much wider than in a lot of the other elements. But I also think like there's a correlation. People change their handling and do crazy things in containers, and it's the element that everyone dreads and, you know, and hates. I mean, there's many reasons for it, but yeah, you handle your dog, whether there's containers out there, whether there's vehicles out there, or whether there's trees or a museum or, you know, the kitchen, whatever, you're handling your dog. You stick to the supportive, clear communication.
Right.
So I had a question. It's containers, but you talk about it throughout, right? And I'm guessing it came from agility handling, which was all about the straight lines and not making the curves and pivots. And
yes.
Does that really just come from clarity to the dog instead of wandering behind them? It's like, I'm following your path. I'm trying not to draw your attention away from where it is that you're going. Is that how you got to that?
Well, certainly in agility, But the fact of the matter is, if your dog is leading, like if your dog's pulling, and they don't have to like drag you, okay, but pulling, like there's some tension, you can't arc. Like only the dog arcs. You're either stopped and pivoting, or you're in a straight line. Our jobs are straight lines because it's the only way to get pulled. You get pulled, the line goes straight. The dog starts to arc. If you drift to try and stay behind the dog, which is what we all thought we used to do, you're actually like centrifugally forcing, a different picture. You're influencing the dog a different way. You're leading the dog. Like just shut your eyes and do the search with your eyes shut, and all your handling will be correct because your dog will be leading you everywhere. You won't be like, but I think we should check this box over here, And so it's literally like if you look at following, handling, and the dog leading, you're either on a straight line or you're stopped and waiting for the dog to pull you off another arc. Yeah. Over to you, Dana, in the newsroom.
I think it's mostly just about trying to get rid of that notion that in order to follow the dog, you have to be behind the dog, literally. Right. And once you kind of let that go, you find yourself perpendicular, sometimes parallel, like you're all different positions with the dog all throughout the search. The odor is so curved and the dog works on so many curves. It makes it clearer a lot of times when we are just, like Sue said, we're just moving in these straight, more kind of controlled movements when the dog's working these complex pictures around us. And I think it quiets our movements in a different way, and we're less likely to draw the dog's attention that way. The goal is to try to keep the dog search focused as much as possible and not draw their attention to us unless we really need it. And so often than not, when we're trying to stay behind or we're worried about being in the dog's way, we're constantly putting ourselves in a position where the dog says, "What are you doing? Where are you going? What are you doing? Do you need me? Should I be doing something else?" Mm-hmm. And it can be a split second, but again, we're taking the dog's focus away from the search when we do that. So we really find that when you clean up your handling around the dog and just simplify your movements around them and in response to them, it allows the dog to keep that search focus better.
Yeah.
And going back, and this is going to piggyback on it. Well, somebody mentioned about how to improve confidence of an environmentally sensitive dog while getting him to be independent as well. And I think you kind of touched upon that a little bit with that explanation, Dana, about being there to support the dog and being more present and not worrying. Because I think with some of the environment, because we have a lot of people that have environmentally sensitive dogs, I think if we're focused and kind of working that search with the dog and not worrying about the environment, because I think we worry about it more than they do in sometimes,
yeah.
And then, us being more hyper aware makes the dog a little bit more hyper aware. So, any other tips besides what you just kind of talked about a little bit about helping an environmentally sensitive dog?
I'll let Sue probably talk the most about this. Well, we both have had a lot of experience with it.
Yeah.
I will say that, again, it goes back to choice. And the more often the environmentally sensitive dog has the choice to search when they want to search or where they want to search, the more likely they want to search. And that if I keep putting my dog in a situation where I'm either forcing them to go into uncomfortable positions by sometimes pairing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I had her searching for primary, she was the first dog I ever had that felt like it was a setup. She was like, "I don't feel safe going there. And now I feel like I have to, or I really, really should because that food's sitting there, but I can't." And when we switched to odor and things kind of changed, she felt like she actually had more of a choice. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it made a huge difference for her. So I think we have to be very careful about what we're setting our dogs up for. And But I think the most important thing is that if they say no, thank you, I say no problem.
Right.
And they come back and they say, really, I didn't have to? Well, okay, I think I could do this today. And I
Right.
say, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And then the next time I say, what do you think about that? And they say, no. And I say, no problem. Let's go back to what you think is okay. And then the next time I say, okay, today, what do you think about this? And they say, I'm willing to give that a shot. And then it's like these incremental, like empowering sessions that kind of go through. And before I know it, I'm going into a search feeling like, okay, I've got to watch my dog's back. I've got to make sure they're this. And the dog is like, I don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it's like I'm getting a dog where it's like, whoa. I mean, I'm at elite with Winnie. Like,
Yep.
who the hell would have ever thought that would happen? And it's all because she always has the choice to search or not. Always, even today.
I think a lot of people think with an environmentally sensitive dog that they've got to like lead them or like be the first to step into the lava pit or they take over because the dog's slow or they guide them. And I'm like, no. With the environmentally sensitive dog, it's like your handling has to be spot on. And you've got to be following and responding and listening to your dog way more than people with confident dogs.
Yeah.
And you may have to be a little closer to them. Like I'm often very close to my dog, much closer than my other dogs. My nervous one, I want him to know I am right there and I'm with him. And if he takes a step into like the scary, dark area, I'm taking a step. You know, even if I'm right behind him, I want him to know, like, I'm there. I'm right there with you. And sometimes I'll do him on leash more so he can feel and know where I am. And I'll take him off if I see that he is confident.
Yeah.
But I think the mistake people make with environmental dogs is to take over.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's because in their and this is where the challenge is with reactive dogs as well. People are managing their dogs so much in regular life, they just have a difficult time of relinquishing that in
Absolutely.
So it's a quite a process to get people to be a teammate instead of a caregiver in that moment.
Yes.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we are their caregivers almost all the time, but they're doing nose work. We can't do their job. And they
exactly.
So,
and that's what builds confidence in them. I mean, this is a miracle sport for the nervous dog.
Yeah, it is.
I started doing it with my new dog, Nog, to help him cope with new places and to build his confidence. And I never thought, well, will he be able to do nose work for nose work's sake, right? Like, and now he's like, I love nose work, and he's doing it not because it's helping him, although it is. So the sport will take you further, and the dogs, but we got to listen to them, and we have to stop thinking taking over and managing the search area, and we have to keep true to the dog in known or blind searches and let them tell us the best way to work odor.
Right. Because and that's one of the wonderful things about the sport. It's like it does so much for the dogs if we let it. It's like whether you already have a confident dog or young dogs. And that one of the challenges we're experiencing now, lots of young dogs and lots of people pushing. And it's and well, if you think about it, they're having to navigate being an adolescent dog and all that. And sometimes, and they're just trying, I have the youngest dog and blah, blah, blah to do. It's like, nobody cares about that actually, except for you. Well, it's true. I mean, not to sound like a jerk, but it's like there's no real prize for that. If you have the youngest dog, just yay for you, but just means you have a lot of time and money to do that. It's so I have to say that's one thing that taking your time to read and get to know the dog is so important. That's why my young puppy had to kind of remind me that, like, he's a confident dog, but he was like, but I'm still an LS and my brain is all So, so I had to be totally mindful of that. So I got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're almost at the hour. I want to encourage everybody who hasn't bought the book to get it. It's awesome. Lots of great exercises and information on it. You can get it on Amazon and
Just Amazon right now, although it will be available through Dogwise and Clean Run soon. But right now, it's Amazon.
Yep. So if you don't have it, because it also has the other thing I wanted to just highlight, it has so many wonderful exercises to do and work on. So those of you who are in remote parts of the world and of the country, it gives you something to do and something to work on while you're waiting for your online or trying to go to classes. Because I know not everybody has, like in our area, we have so many trainers and so many places to go. So we're very fortunate here, but not every place.
So lucky.
Yes, you're lucky.
And I also just want to put out there, we're working right now on editing some video to go along with the book that we're going to put on my website so we can have more video examples of different things, because I know there are some concepts that are kind of hard to grasp in the written word. So we're working on that, and we will have an ebook as well. And then we will also be doing an audiobook, which is it's going to be really fun. So I'm just putting it out there.
We're going to be
reading the book,
the audiobook. And what I know I'll be
that's going to take a long time.
Tegan's asking, I see there's workbooks online. Those are the secondary to the book. No?
No.
The workbooks online are AI generated. They were
already?
They came out in 24 hours of the book being published. And there's many different ones. There is no workbook. Do not
buy that.
We don't endorse it. We didn't write it. There's a workbook in our book. There's training exercises. Now I feel really bad for people who get scammed.
Yeah,
I know.
We don't know these authors. And
it's happening. It happened to Suzanne. No, not to Suzanne. Somebody else.
Yeah, it did.
Sure.
With the whole book. Yep. So
somebody. But Yep. So
terrible.
So then order it on Amazon only, and only order the book right now. And then we'll definitely keep you posted on more stuff that's going on. So
and then Dana, what is your website for those who don't know?
Oh yeah, it's zinndogtraining.com. Zinn. And we have all of our webinars and listed there, and it's we're gonna eventually have merch and stuff, and it's fun. I've got my sweatshirt on today.
Wait.
Oh, she's got her shirt on.
There you go.
Nostril fueled. And
you can go out and purchase previously recorded ones too, right?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, we have previously.
Okay.
So,
and Sue, what's your website? Do you still have a website? Yes.
Oh yeah, but it's caca. It's Sue Sternberg. SueSternberg.com. Go to Zinn Dog Training. Like that's where all our stuff.
Okay.
My stuff. And we have a webinar coming up Thursday, which is a very exciting one.
It's gonna be good.
And what's the topic?
It's called Making Suggestions, but it turns out to be way more than that.
Oh,
like it always turns out to be more.
What's that?
How do
it always turns out to be?
You could register on my website.
Zinn Dog Training.
It's really funny, y'all. You want to talk about time management? We are not good time management.
I know. I just did a workshop for somebody in Georgia, and it was supposed to be an hour, and it was an hour. She had to bring the hook. Shut up. So I get it. It's okay. Hang on, ladies.
Thank you.
Sign off.